I'm going to start out reading one that someone handed me. Recently, the scientific journals have been talking about fractals, a mathematical technique to enhance and manipulate graphics. It is a mathematical way to enhance the details of a picture using the most basic images and then making the image grow in detail while keeping it under control. And then the question directed toward me, have you been using fractals long before they were invented? I want to refer you again to a bit about the simplicity that I mentioned several weeks ago, and specifically about a kind of bewildering blatancy of the simplistic basis of this. And let me refer you back to one I have mentioned once or twice, but in many respects it is the epitome of the difficulty of ever seeing this kind of bewildering simplicity, much less ever being able to remember it. And that's the variations of ordinary people, oftentimes with scientific and academic credentials, but still it is life talking at the ordinary level, pointing out areas wherein it seems that man is doing something opposed to, quote, nature, or nature with a capital N in the written literature, or the times that such as psychologists say or sociologists say the phenomenon that we are investigating in this area of human behavior, we do not know yet whether it is something natural arising in man or whether it's some sort of perversion, and then they can't go anywhere else, but it's like some perversion that man himself has come up with. They are somewhat at a verbal loss since they're not dealing with demons anymore. Because if it was good religious people, good old down-home people, they would say the perversions are coming about through the work of evil forces. But this feeling that is ingrained and that is now part of the verbal vocabulary of a sophisticated person is that in some way man can be at odds with capital N nature. And I have mentioned this enough that all of you should have had some glimpse. And it's not simply a matter of me being able to come up with a paradoxical verbal commentary, or it is not because in some way I can become an unusual critic and say, look how foolish things are. But you have got to see, this is just a prime example, that it is built into everyone. All of you are educated and sophisticated enough long before you got here that it has the ring of the truth to it. At your own line-level consciousness, you should be able to feel that if you were back in your position, that you would read through such a comment and perhaps nod along knowingly. When they point out that in some way humanity, through the so-called pollution of the environment, that in some way humanity can not only be opposed to, and loggerheads working at different speeds and different directions to capital N nature, but overlooking the fact that what they're saying is in some way humanity is separate from whatever it is they mean by nature. And I could point out that on another scale what they're saying is a variation of my old equation, is they're using not I as being capital N nature. It is the astounding simplicity, even though it would have been described other ways in times past. But I'm taking the ammunition available now, I'm taking the kinds of attitudes, the scientific approaches, even the accepted scientific truths. And I'm taking not just the words of people, I am taking the words of life itself, talking through man at the ordinary level. And it all has the ring of validity, that there is no doubt in some way man can stand apart from this capital N nature, from the environment. Also on that basis, it would appear to answer a lot of questions, whether you had the questions or not originally. But once it's brought up, the, quote, problems going on in life, since we'll assume now that at least you people, and a large part of the Western world's population, are no longer completely tied to the ideas of gods and demons anymore, then you're left with Why do we have problems? Why is there pollution? Why is there warfare? Why do people become mass murderers? It is not nature's way. And they'll point out that you do not see animals as a rule engaged in some sort of non-physically or non-territorially based homicide. They used to love to always drag that one out, that man's the only creature that kills his fellow creature for no reason. The answer seems to lie then in the fact that in some way man can pervert whatever grand plan, capital N, nature had going, wherein the trees look after their own business, oaks do not fight pines, little hillets do not get trampled by mountains, green fish are not ostracized by red fish, that it all seems to be Rousseau and some of the later people's belief in a great peaceable kingdom, and only man stands apart from it. Well, as I said, people do not necessarily sit around and even internally debate with themselves such questions. And so it passes to a certain degree without any specific notice, but it is a kind of new answer to gods and demons. But on a good day, since I have not wasted my time speaking about all of you and a few other people in other places, speaking of you in toto, almost all of you have had some kind of glimpse that that is not true. And if I wanted to stop again, I could, based upon our past degree of success, I could talk another 5 or 10 minutes on this and conjure up more examples and approach it different ways and get a good handful of you to get a flash of aha. Not just with verbal means, but you'd get an aha that there is no way in which man is separate from capital N nature. Or there is really no question that they propose by saying we do not know whether this manifestation of mortal behavior is natural to man, is it native to man for him to be prejudiced, for him to be warlike, for him to have even passing urges to slaughter his children, or is this some kind of perversion on humanity's part? And it sounds like a good cocktail question, because you cannot then end up and say, all right, if it's the latter, then where did the perversion come from? And it would seem so obvious. That is, that someone would say it, or that somebody engaged in such affairs, if the ordinary affairs of man at the line level of consciousness were actually the leading edge of what life was up to, then you would think, well, somewhere in the midst of these scientists, these psychologists, these social commentators, once it was pointed out that either these kinds of questionable behavior, untoward behavior of humanity, it is either natural or it's perversion. It is, in some way, he's acquired this, and it's running against the grain of what good old Mother Nature had in mind. Then you would think just some ordinary person, if that was indeed the avant-garde of life's own consciousness through humanity, that someone in their midst would say, all right, if it is the latter, where's the storehouse outside of what we're calling nature? Where is it man goes to get this perversion? Or how does it afflict him? Where does it come from? Is it some kind of disease that's been lingering around in cypress trees and we just can't identify it, and if he gets too close, then he gets angry? Or is it some sort of microscopic germ that we cannot identify? But if it's all of that, then someone's going to have to turn around and say, wait a minute, that still falls back into the camp of capital N nature. But notice at line level consciousness of humanity's and of yours, no such question arises. And even through the trickery and chicanery and your own effort of getting glimpses of this, ask yourself, if you can do so, how often this strikes you. I know the answer. I'll be charitable about it, since I can't be Christian about it. I'll be charitable about it. Not often enough. You hear a comment made, it may not seem to have the academic foundations of some of the examples I made perhaps, but someone says, how could a human act in such an inhumane manner? That's not natural for a person to have desires to dress up like a pumpkin and to try and have erotic encounters with a garden hose, or It's not natural. But the question never arises. There is nothing in consciousness, based upon the information available, there's nothing in consciousness to say, well, wait a minute, if that be true, where are all of these unnatural urges, these unnatural desires, these unnatural acts, from whence do they springeth? Assuming you talk like that. But notice, such questions do not arise in ordinary consciousness. The nervous system does not ask those questions. And even after you get glimpses of it, even after you've had enough of a glimpse of it, that you know that right there, from one verbal mapping of it at least, right there is the point of demarcation between ordinary consciousness and whatever this is going to another level of consciousness, to the beginning of another circuit that is not based upon binary attributes and considerations. And yet you pass it by all the time, not just hearing from external sources, the voices in you, as they should, as they were wired to do, continually make their own comments, judgments, observations, critiques, reactions to what goes on in life, what you see, what you read, what you observe on the television set. And the basis is always, in some way, that somebody, a world leader, a mad killer somewhere, a man who just written a new inflammatory book, the voices have things to say along the lines that this is unnatural. This man should be investigated. He should be put away, he should be studied, he should be impeached, he should be overthrown. And it's on the basis that in some way this individual, or some group of individuals, has strayed. To say the very least, they have strayed from the path, from the plan that capital N nature had in mind. All right, if their equation is man plus nature equals everything, where does man get this ability to stray? Where does man get perverted ideas? Where does man get unnatural desires? Where does man get unnatural urges to behave in certain ways? The answer, of course, is no more forthcoming than it was in earlier times when they would be speaking of such things as our God, whatever group it was, a capital G God. He knows it all, he created it all, he's in charge of it all, and boy, is he a good guy. And somebody says, if that's true, why did my little niece die when she was 3 days old? If that's true, why is half the world starving? It is not a part, it is not a serious part of any religion anywhere. It can't be. And bringing it more up to date, which I was trying to do at least verbally with my examples, is the kinds of questions. I don't mean just some kind of ordinarily wired smart aleck playing out his little small role, necessary though it may be. I'm talking about the same kinds of people, that is, the same kinds of consciousness and parts of life's body that presents these observations, that ask these rhetorical or theoretical questions about how can man, in some instance, appear to be in such a perverse lockstep or out of step with nature. Those same questions, where consciousness is right now, even in those of the real upper mechanical levels of yellow circuit activity, the same people that ask such questions cannot anymore tolerate the kinds of questions I've pointed out of, well, where does man get this if he does not get it from nature? They cannot be entertained simultaneously any more than can the erstwhile questions of, all right, if God is so great, why is this going on? They both cannot operate. They're in that triaxial dance. They move, and as you can observe for yourself, it's been a continuing process. That triaxial of religion has been shifting for a long time. In a sense, it is shifting a little faster now. It'll be shifting, if I insisted on giving you some kind of measurement, which is not important, would appear to be shifting faster generations after ours. But that is the bewildering blatancy of the simplistic point right between this and what life is thinking at its mechanical best. that the very things that would appear to be extremely important questions. What can we do with the continuing crack of the human personality under the ever-increasing stress of modern life? We've gotten so far away from living on the land and collecting berries and herding sheep, living in skyscrapers and not getting enough fresh air, not getting enough sunlight. It's driving people crazy. We're living an unnatural life. But consciousness cannot then ask, how do you live an unnatural life? How did we come up with this? If we need any further proof of the difficulty of not only seeing it, which as I put it originally, of seeing it and remembering it, look at the difficulty in seeing it. I've been here singing and dancing now for 10 or 12 minutes. And most of you remember, I've talked about this before, most of you think, I've almost had glimpses of that, but I can't quite see it tonight. I know it had to do with something important. And it's not important of me proving verbally that this is correct, but it's the fact that it is built in. I could equate it, if I didn't make that clear enough, with what used to be a kind of mechanical spread in a cultural sense of different times and different places of religion, but now it seems to be, as I pointed out to you several times, a kind of moving timely hierarchy that went from it being gods and demons into it now being traumas, and it being in some way that humanity, individually, if not collectively, has begun to stray away from the natural path. That we would all be living much easier, we would not have the kind of neuroses we have, we would not be the walking wounded, if perhaps we'd all move back to farms, or at least most of us. If we would live a simple life and all get a calico dress, well, those of you men who calico matches your eyes, we had little animals, no TV, no electricity, and it has the ring to many people. It has a ring as though someone is calling, come back home. And it's the ancient belief in the native savage. There's always been here, that no matter what was going on, I can assure you the time the Greeks first came up with indoor plumbing, I can assure you that in 2 or 3 years that there were people, that's the way life works. You should know now, there were people walking around saying, have you noticed how many more instances we have of the nobility, or at least the upper classes, being drunk? Something's causing this, and I believe it's the kind of pressures now inherent of people having to use indoor plumbing facilities. It's not natural. Our forefathers and everybody squatted in the woods, we all went in the woods, and now you have to go and you have to wash your hands, you have to wait in line, you have to go indoors. It's probably the odors of this. It's unnatural. And there, I assure you, there were a few people around that agreed. Then it was a belief we should tear all these down and everybody start going back to the woods and we would all feel better. It's a variation now. That in some way technology, contemporary times, has completely gotten out of hand and man has strayed from a path that would be natural. Since I seem to be pulling you all uphill tonight, I believe without further ado, I'll press this on just a little bit. Same general area and things I've mentioned, but I will not resist the urge to throw in one more little piece, and that is to remind you of the absolutely masterful stroke. I can sketch it out again verbally, and it doesn't do any good because verbally you can hear it and it's almost logical, and then it's gone without you seeing it. And that is that for life's own purposes, instilling in man the belief, as it would generally be called, of freedom of will, that we are individually responsible and that we have some degree, somewhere between absolute and almost absolute, taking into account the rules of the road and the dictates of the prevailing government, but somewhere internally in one's little bitty soul and heart and mind, it's a matter of freedom of will. And well, at least parenthetically remind you people that as much as I had to lay on this for a while to get you to look in a certain direction, it's not a matter that people are simply robots and it's all hopeless. If it's all hopeless, what have I been doing here and what have you been doing here? But there is a fueling in all of humanity at line level consciousness. There is a fueling that creates a consistent struggle against the presently inevitable. But the masterfulness of this is by it being arranged in such a way, humanity continues to struggle against that which is presently inevitable, and it causes the continuing expansion and growth of humanity, of life. All right, I'll make it cruder. Remember, this is crude, and I didn't want to do it, but I can see that the moon must be full tonight. Everybody's got the summertime blues, and Eddie Cochran's not even here. Thank God. See, this is not true, and I should not be this crude. But with wolves, you have to let us say that humanity, individuals, have no freedom of will, cannot do anything, cannot feel, cannot think, cannot move in any way other than they're wired up and destined to do. But then life, in the yellow circuit, minimally, has everyone believing that I do have freedom of will, I can make decisions, I can alter things directly here having to do with me. That everybody, let's say, believes that. An absolute contradiction to the first status that I detail. That is, that no one can do anything. Do you not see the energy produced by everyone talking, trying to feel, and as far as you can observe out there, and then you attempting to move in such a way as to prove the second part true, that I can do something, when the fact is, remember this is not true, but the fact is that no one can do anything. Do you not see the kind of energy that produces? It is a masterstroke. Except remember that is not literally true, but you insisted on having it crudely. My first description was my preferable one for the night. That is, men continuing to struggle against the presently inevitable. But it creates a constant source of energy within life's own cells. And with that, I am absolutely going to leave all of this tonight. Seeing how much you people can see at any one time. But then someone should say, well, that's the present inevitable. And to that I say, since this is old timers night, something else I mentioned that I want to go back into for a bit. And it has to do, I'm going to take it from what may have appeared at the time to be an out there level. That is the ways in which I've touched on it in the past, is I have pointed out that groups of people, in particular those, or the examples I use, that would apparently be involved with religion or some kind of mystical work of some nature, and how it had to be at the ordinary level supported by busy work. The obvious one being, it's always been there, is you go to almost any church of any denomination, and there's going to be some sort of building project going on. They may only be down, they may have just finished the new building a year ago, but they've already taken up money for architectural plans and surveys to expand it, or to buy the property across the street because this is not really what we all thought. Now, busy work is not some folly on their part. Because as many of you are still want to, in weak moments, write me a note, or I can read it in your little face, the question of, I just know I'm in the right place, I know I'm doing the right thing, it's the first time in my life I have felt any assurance of what I was doing, and yet I wonder, all the tasks, all the things you've talked about, how can I really know if I'm making the right kind of effort? How do I know sometimes if I'm even making effort? How do I know if I'm getting anywhere? Sometimes I know without a doubt. I just have flashes that somebody could hold a gun to my head and tell me to stop this, and I'd tell them to stop it. And then an hour later, I can wonder, what in the hell am I doing with this? It just seems as though I draw a blank and I can't tell that I'm that much different than I was a year, 2, 3, 4 years before. Take it at the most simplistic level, which I'm about to take you to. And that's ordinarily what is needed, is visible, tangible proof of progress. Well, I know. Now, of course, it's absolutely true. Let's start off right quick with the business world. Profits are up, or at least the profits are not up. Our markets are expanding. Our production will be up, and therefore profits will be up. Gross sales will at least be up next year. Get into less mundane things. Someone that takes some kind of self-help course, and they lose weight through the power of self-hypnosis, through the power of Swami Z's philosophy. I've quit drinking. Or through both of them, I quit drinking and lost weight. It is physical. Something has happened. Or if you get it more into the religions, all the way from the so-called cults, that something different has happened. I'm now a different person because I've shaved my head and I've painted a green triangle on the top of my bald head. Or I now, 3 days a week, I go to Mass. Or I now wear my little hat and I go to the temple. I now observe the laws. I now go to confession. I now, on certain holidays, I wrap myself in some sort of sash. We go through a communal service. The people there shake my hand. They tell me, you are now part of our church. Our God now approves of you. And you look around for confirmation, the minister, the rabbi, somebody says, that's true. Have you done so-and-so? Yes. Have you done so-and-so? Are you doing so-and-so? Yes. You are one of us. You are one of the chosen. There has been a change in your life. Can't you feel it? And you look around, everybody says yes, and you say yes too. And it's not a joke. But there is that which by all ordinary, from all ordinary views, would appear to be visible and or tangible proof of success. That I am in some way different. And you could, of course, now take the attitude that just by shaving your head or by putting on some kind of new clothes or you get a new name. But now all of you on a good day know that that is no change at all, not what we're talking about. But now notice the difficulty in this. There is no ordinary way, but if it tries to come up, I normally step on it, or I discourage you obliquely at least, from thinking as though there is an ordinary way that, listen, I've been having dreams every time I do the numbers, every time I sit. Not every time, but it seems as though every Tuesday I begin to see kind of an orange color floating above my kitchen. But don't everybody laugh. Too many of you have written me such as that, and I'm not laughing, and I send you notes back. And my general comment, written-wise and out here I've told you, is as long as there's something going on that you do not understand, no matter that voices in you say, this is surely importance of mysticism to come. If you do not understand it and you can't control it, then fuck it. Just ignore it. But the thing that, all right, it's beyond my control and I am having these visions, I can't yet make out faces or figures, but it's just kind of an orange cloud floats in my kitchen almost every Tuesday when I do the numbers. If that's all you have to say, I'm telling you the truth, ignore it. I bring that up as the example that I do not make fun of it. I don't treat it lightly when you ask me. I treat it seriously to tell you to ignore it and don't pursue such as that. But a part of the basis of that is it's built into everyone, starting at the ordinary level, and it keeps affecting you doing this until there is a certain degree of activity in higher circuits. The need to feel as though, well, I'm making some kind of progress. Why in the world would anyone, as dumb as I may be, said you to yourself, pursue anything if I didn't feel as though there was some kind of progress possible? And so assuming that that must be true, how do I know it? To take it just from external worlds of commerce and religion and psychology and self-help, how about internal, if we talked about the circuits themselves? If we were attempting, if I was running this in a certain way, and there are aspects of this piecemeal in life right now, and always has been, of people attempting to do some form of some great secret work, and it's all was primarily devoted toward one of the circuits or the other. If we had red circuit people, be they believingly engaged in some unordinary activity or not, but you could have red circuit people judging progress by showing, here is our new sanctuary, here is the new house we built for our great leader, I helped build it. Me and the other people, we saved the money, but we got here and we built it. Or he could show you his muscles. You know, since I've joined up here, I quit drinking, I quit smoking, get a lot of exercise. I know that's what the gods wanted. He told me it was. Our group believes in that. Look how much better I feel. There seems to be something you can see. And maybe you knew the person before. Yes, you don't even look like yourself anymore. I don't cough. I can run. I can lift weights. I'm strong. I'm healthy. If it was devoted more toward the blue circuit center, we could have people then come out and present their paintings, their poetry. Before I became involved with this, I thought I was a neo-German expressionist. I had dreams of maybe being Jason Pollock's illegitimate son or daughter, but now, since I've been involved with this, look what I'm painting. It's not the same. And you might have seen some of the early paintings, and you'd probably agree, no, it's not the same. No, this is not ordinary painting. But I now feel inspired to write poetry. Would you read this? There seems to be some measurable kind of progress. At the very least, some alteration. But now consider this. When you hit the yellow circuit, when you start going right up at its very limits, the celebration there is almost entirely a solitary affair. What do you have to show? Now, I will point out, to move back fairly close to line level consciousness, that you can have with scientists, you can have with people attempting to enlarge, as they would call it, their own consciousness, is this feeling of, listen, I just had the greatest thought that I believe has probably been thought in this part of the world in the last 48 hours. Let me tell you about it. But by now also, you people should know, when it gets closer into the realm of what this thing is, almost all of you know now, it can just be that you just want to roll on the floor and kick your little feet, and maybe write it down and send it to me next Thursday. But many, many, many of you are now getting to the point that you have some realization, if you don't want to call it understanding, that it takes some of the wind out to tell anybody, even write it down to me. You're almost left with a solitary celebration of just... And anything other than that, to say the very least, for me to put words in your mouth and head, is almost anticlimactic. That this can't be repeated. Since I'm not getting the best cooperation tonight, I'm not going to give you a punchline to this. I will leave it at the point that I have pointed out what I pointed out, and to note for you that I am very aware that it seems to be it comes and goes, and the majority of you, the vast majority of you, are no longer caught up with that, but you should be aware of the fact that those voices, those urges, are native to man, that there's got to be some way to judge progress, and the ordinary conception, the ordinary gauge, is limited to that which is visible and or tangible. And you can work your way up the circuitry of man, you can work your way up what would appear to be perhaps a kind of invisible hierarchy of going all the way from the world of commerce up to the world of religion. In that spectrum, at ordinary line level consciousness, there is some way that people, it just has to be, can gauge what they would call progress, whether it be shaving their head, adopting a new name, changing their diet. But there is some way, not just themselves, they can turn to someone and say, you remember who I was 6 months ago. Look at me, I'm not the same person. Whether my name is different, I now attend meetings 4 nights a week, I now go through some ritual twice a month, I now shave part of my head, I now only eat certain foods, I've lost weight, I no longer drink alcohol. And there's obviously, from whatever source, if you're just an ordinary acquaintance or friend of theirs, you'd say, yes, something has happened. They say, I feel better, I have changed for the better. There's no way to naysay it. That is built in, it is in the wiring system. But notice, how can you judge this? What is there to prove? What is there to take out of your pocket? What is there to show somebody? Now, it's going to be nice and stop, but I'll throw in one more. On the contrary, should some ordinary person now say to you, you know what, I'm not sure, but something's different about you. Those who understand the most now, at least non-verbally, would deny it. What? I hadn't been feeling well. No, something's different. You're not the same as you used to be. Ah, hell, have a drink. You do something to distract them. Because those of you who understand the most understand not only is that meaningless, that is captious. You're in no position to honor me. You're in no position to brag on me. So it's not only a matter of not having a readily available through the red, yellow, or red, blue, and hardly the yellow circuit to judge that there's been some progress, been some change. Should those at ordinary level insist to you there has been some, anyone who understands anything would either deny it, distract them, get them drunk, get drunk with them, leave, because at that level it's not true. If they can see it, it's meaningless. All right. Is everyone aware of this fact? Talking about the ordinary world, apparently talking about the body politic, since it's just an available example. As far back as the history of man goes, the yellow circuit being activated and talking and writing, governments, that is, whoever's in power, one man, a government itself, whether it's in by force or it's in by apparent election, it just changes by degrees, it lessens a bit. But governments, through the way in which life uses them, continually raise up the spectrum of an enemy. Surely all of you know what I'm talking about. Whoever's in power in some country, let's say the easiest example, but it's true everywhere, it's just varying degrees, it diminishes slightly if you get into areas that apparently external power is not the way the government is taken and then run. But let's say it's somewhere that there was a coup, and a man has taken over. He's been there a year or so, him and his brothers and his henchmen. He continually, that is life, has this man continually raising the spectrum. Nowadays, if they're close to America, they decide that America's got the most money. It's, hey, they're communist, not only under my bed, they're on the roof, they're everywhere. I don't even trust my mother. They're communist everywhere. It was back as far as the Romans, it's back as far as everyone, that those in apparent external control of power raise the spectrum of an enemy. And to give it an ordinary description, the way in which life uses it at the ordinary level, it promotes fear. It promotes a sense of solidarity with the people. And it promotes an apparent common cause. Has everyone got that? Forget all political ramifications, because it has nothing to do with what we were really up to. But it is going on continually. It is so well known that life itself is now produced in other parts of its body in man, of those pointing out the criticism of it. That life has ordinary people pointing out, hey, now this group of people that took over this little country, they keep talking about the communists or the fascists or the purple party is going to take over, and we don't see any signs of it. They're just doing that to keep the people from bitching about, there's not enough food, and the guy that took over control, him and all his family, seeing all their money at the Cayman Islands, and they just keep hollering about somebody who's going to take them over so they can clamp down on power. About every 2 months they holler, we got to have some kind of emergency powers here because the communists or the purple party is going to take over. I'm just assuming all of you people hear that. This is just a preface. But it goes on continually, and it goes on even, at least you think I'm pointing somewhere far, or some obscure corner of life's body. It goes on even in what appears to be non-physically controlled government, such as ours. It just doesn't seem to be as harsh. That Republicans say, listen, if the Democrats ever get in, if they ever take back over the Senate, we're going to spend ourselves to hell, the defense will collapse. It just seems to be less. But it's always that there is some form of power somewhere that continually raises to the others, those that seem to be under their control. It raises the continual specter of an impending enemy. And it produces a fear, and it produces a sense, in general, of solidarity with the people that we must get together here, and there's a common cause. That's the preface. Can any of you see any connection between that and your entire wired-up being, and then that which seems to be the voice that speaks for you? Can anyone see what is normally referred to as one's personality, one's own, whatever the prevailing eye is, of it continually discovering internal enemies? It is a constant source. That's what the voices are up to. That is the way people are wired, that this apparent one's eye of personality, one's individual self, is continually discovering impending, serious threats and enemies. Could anyone carry it past my preface and see how this helps to establish, to continually hold I's position of authority and power? No? Well, how about the question I haven't asked you in a year or so? Why is it that no one finds it strange that everyone on this planet is dissatisfied? No matter how much money they got, no matter how successful they are, they will admit to you. Nowadays they'll admit on TV, on the Carson Show, on 60 Minutes. Yes, I am rich, and yes, I control the destiny of hundreds of thousands of workers. But you know what? I'll tell you the truth. I've been in analysis for 20 years. I seem to have this kind of hostility. Well, I can't get along. I shouldn't call it hostility, maybe. I don't seem to be able to relate to close personal relations. I don't seem to have enough feeling of humility. I'll admit to you, I have my own personal demons. There are things that bother me. No, you wouldn't know it by looking at me, perhaps, but by no means am I happy with myself. No one sees any connection between that and some little banana republic dictator that has to continually to hold everybody in line. They're starving to death. He mistreats them. He bullies everybody around. He holds everything for himself. And every time there seems to be the least possibility of an uprising, he begins to holler, communist, fascist. We all got to band together. It's a good thing you got me. You people wouldn't even noticed it. You're out there in the street starving to death and having fun and dancing. I'm aware of it. I got my finger on the, I'm keeping up with this. The barbarians are at the door. No one sees any connection between that and this thing that you have always lived with. That God, I'm in such terrible shape. I mean, if people knew the nightmares I have, if people knew the potential obscene, unnatural acts in which I would engage were it not for at least external restraints, if people only knew the horrible thoughts I've had. Nobody hears any connection between that and a good 25-cent dictator that every time he feels the least bit insecure is to holler, they're at the gate again, we got to watch it. And if they take over, woe be to our men, women, and children, all of our institutions, our good name, everything we've worked and fought for, to go hungry and to suffer, they'll take it away from us. That doesn't sound familiar to anybody. I don't mean turn on the news and listen to some dictator from Nicaragua or Cuba or somewhere. You don't have to listen somewhere else. Nobody, that doesn't sound familiar. It just goes under different terminology. It creates fear. It seems to create the feeling within people, speaking about just the ordinary run of line level consciousness people, I'm going to have to pull myself together. I have been eating too much. I have been drinking too much. I do get angry too much. Something's got to be done. I can't end up my days like this. I'll cut my life short. I'll ruin my reputation. I'll lose yet another playmate. Something's got to be done. So people like Castro seem like they only speak 5 or 6 hours at a time, and the press is impressed. Look inside. 5 or 6 hours is nothing. You got a dictator that's been talking like that for 30 or 40 years, non-stop. Continual threats, internal dangers, fifth columns at work, spies. It's unnatural, right? Where'd they come from? I don't care to go into that. I just know I am severely, if not terminally, flawed. And the only possible saving grace I have is the ability to be periodically aware of it. Well, if that's a potential saving grace, we're back to that old dirty question, then why is not everyone by now, as they would call it, perfect and satisfied? So you've always been an introspective person. Yes, I have. And you've never lived in some delusion about being unusually gifted. Oh, no. Oh, listen. I know my flaws. I mean, I started reading Freud when I was 15. I've been through this and this group, and I've switched religions several times. And you started about 15, yes. And you're how old now? 60, yes. And I still make no claims. I'm still not much better than I was when I started. Well, hey, hooray. You're ordinary. But nobody sees any connection between that and a banana dictator. Nobody sees any connection between that and the instilled wiring belief that we are free. We're free to do what we want to. Not just to be some second-rate critic of everyone else. At least at times I can turn it where it does the most good. I can turn it on myself and be critical. I see the dangers. Oh, much better than any psychiatrist. You don't have to tell me that I'm not perfect. Oh, I know it. I sweat at night. Many's a night. I think about my own flaws, the dangerous impulses that heretofore I've resisted to some degree. Nobody hears this little dictator, this little government, or this continual rallying cry of impending danger, threats, and this feeling of fear, followed by, nobody notices, just this, followed by this feeling, well, starting tomorrow, I'm going to pull myself together. Now that I can see clearly one of my great follies, I mean, now I see it. I thought I'd seen it before. I know I thought I saw it when I was 15, but now I see it. Now that I'm 60, I really see it. Now that I see it, there's only one thing to do. Tomorrow, I'll stop it. You can say that different governments come and go everywhere, but always notice this. There is always a government. How about this? How about the great meditative life? The religious, the cult kind of life of withdrawing. The great mystical hermit. Based all the way from religious retreats, the monks of certain religions, all the way up until the little communes of today of New Age groups. It could be easily described, and it's easily accepted by everyone, that this is an attempt to remove oneself from evil or non-productive influences. That someone wanting to lead a spiritual life, someone wanting to contemplate the innumerable names of God, or just the one name, if you happen to knew what it was for the day. But to get away, the meditative life, to separate oneself from evil or unprofitable influences. All of you have had a piece of that. Anyone who ever ends up in this had a piece of it. It is not an alien language or urge. But now, based upon some of the descriptions I've been giving, can you see it another way? It is the attempt. It is the attempt for someone to cut off or to cut transfer opportunities, the passing of heat and energy, to cut it down to the absolute minimum. That's it. That's being a hermit. That's leading the meditative life. And you can describe it as, I'm getting away from distracting influences so I can meditate, so I can ponder. But those wired up in that way, I'm giving you a more specific description of what it is. It is to take the opportunities for all human transfer of energy. Whether we put it, or whether I were to put it under any particular situation under the classification of heat, information, energy, it's just, I don't want to play. And to cut down the opportunities to the absolute minimum. To be a monk. A couple of quick things. I continue to get questions here and some from out of town that the basis of it is asking about substituting or redirecting such things as sex energy. Someone who's without a sex partner. Or people have had occasion here to point out to me that they got involved with several jobs working and they were not being able to live up to the basic conditions I initially made with everyone about a certain amount of physical exercise every day. And they asked me questions which, from their view at the time, is sincere about, well, what can I do? How can I redirect this? How can I learn how to take sex energy or me needing exercise and redirect it? I'll try again to make this, well, I believe I can. I'll make this as verbally simple as possible. When you start dealing with the red and the blue circuit, in certain ways the yellow circuit, but the kinds of things that people have always asked about, this things such as sex, exercise, or wanting to fool around with their diet, beyond the few restrictions I gave you for the reasons I told you, it is not a proper question. There is no proper way to redirect or to substitute sex energy except for fucking. Wrote some question about, well, maybe I could take this energy and I'll use it in trying to write my music or my literature. In a sense, that can be tried, but there is no proper way. And I did not do this for a laugh, because people have asked me, and I understood the seriousness of it, and I've told you my concern that I cannot magically erase of everyone in here not having a sexual partner in here, and then almost all of you finally going through phases of believing or feeling like, well, I just can't get all that involved in anybody that's not tied up with this. And what should I do? How can I rechannel my sex energy for something profitable? There is no profitable way to rechannel sex energy. You're supposed to use sex energy to fuck. If people say, well, it feels like my body, I hadn't been able to exercise lately. I've been working, I'm trying to do my final exams, or I've been typing something, and I've been sitting there at two desks for 12 hours a day from one job to the other, and I can just feel, what should I do, doctor? Can you tell me right quick, what should I do to take care of this? When it starts calling for exercise, there is no substitute. There is no way to redirect it, to refuel it. That is not, of course, what people were looking for. They wanted a trick. Of course, the closest thing it comes to a trick that you don't really have to take it as being part of what I just said, but it's just a matter of strength that comes about through understanding how things are. And if you were the point that you couldn't get involved with sex, or you're the point that just almost absolutely you couldn't get exercise, you just have to understand what's going on. I am terminally horny, or I am almost terminally falling apart from not getting exercise, but I know what it is. There is no trick, there is no substitute, and you just got to be strong enough to put up with it. You got to have some understanding of it. That's why I'm pointing out there is no proper substitute for certain things. There is no proper substitute for food. I mean, the obvious one would be, well, I disapprove of all food. All right, quit eating. But I disapprove of eating so much. All right, don't eat so much. I don't feel like I eat the right kinds of food. Well, eat the kind of foods that you think are right. One more before we read. I had several explanations. If I was a crude sort, I'd call them excuses of people who wrote me notes about why they didn't turn in their story for that little task. The basic potential value within all these tasks that I conjure up is when you correctly sense that if you're going to do it the way you sense I want it done, you can't do it using your ordinary systems. So don't bother to write me these explanations about, some of you just gave me some story about why you couldn't do it, but several people wrote me excuses as to how they began to understand the folly of simply writing a story the way it comes to their mind, because now they understand the kinds of things that normally come to their mind are not worth a damn, and it just kind of runs off the page. The person that, several people wrote me something similar to that. The potential basic benefit is when you do sense that these things that I come up with, whether it be these written tasks or the things out in public, is that you hear me in some way when I describe it, and you sense correctly that the way I want it done, you can't go out, you can't leave here and go do it using the ordinary systems in you, the ordinary circuitry, and you're right. But don't look upon that as a discovery, and don't look upon that as an excuse.